we can start, and I'll do a brief introduction of Kelly Gilbert, who's the director of Metropolitan Energy Center in Kansas City. Kelly, if you'd like to give us any more of your background, feel free to do so. And we've talked to Kelly, and she's going to receive your questions as they come into your brain. So when you have a question, just unmute yourself and then ask the question. Good morning, Kelly.
Good morning, Craig, and everybody else. It's great to see your faces this morning as you were logging in. Virtual is a little simpler in a lot of ways, but and especially if we wanted to have Craig and Keith here with us, I in Colorado it would have been difficult for you, but I am looking forward to the day when I can give an in-person presentation again and call hands and ask, take your questions that way. That's just my favorite.
Is MEC still discouraging in-person stuff?
We have not gone back to in-person work, and of course we're always monitoring the situation, and we do have the occasional in-person committee meeting, so forth. We have occasional in-person meetings, but we're generally still not back at work. We're still work from home.
Right.
We are still, and we are now doing tours of Project Living Proof again, though. So
good. So the floor is yours.
Excellent. Ready to start. Thank you so much, Craig. All right, I'm going to go ahead and share my screen so that you can, I can remember how to do that. Yep. Was talking with Craig this morning. I think everybody uses Zoom. Somehow I haven't done it much. So
here we go. Looking good.
Thank you so much. All right. So Metropolitan Energy Center, I just wanted to give you an update on kind of what we've been up to for the last couple of years, and give you some avenues where you can engage if you are inclined to, and be glad to take your questions and frankly even suggestions about where we should be going with our programs. We're a public nonprofit, and so we are always glad to take input from our constituents, as it were. So we provide resources, outreach, and training so that alternative fuels are no longer alternative, and so that energy efficiency becomes commonplace. We've been around in the Kansas City Metro since 1983 as a nonprofit, and we actually were a program at the city's weatherization department for several years before that. But we turned 40 next year, about a year from today almost. And during that whole time, we've been providing information, education, and community outreach on buildings and energy efficiency, particularly as it relates to neighborhoods and home performance. And currently our building performance area includes work through the Energy Solutions Hub program and the Project Living Proof demonstration home, and the sustainable transportation area, which was developed in about the mid-90s, now consists of two coalitions for the Kansas City Regional Coalition and also a Central Kansas Clean Cities Coalition. And I'll talk more about all of these programs as we go on. And then our board recently asked us to look into whether the region needs us to step up with renewable energy and provide avenues and access to technical assistance and kind of funding assistance for renewables install at the kind of consumer and small business arena. And so I thought it would be a great, they really just a couple of weeks ago asked us to start looking into that. And so I really thought you guys would be a good group to ask if we're needed, and if so, if anybody wants to volunteer to be on a program development team. So we've got some work to do to determine whether or not we're going to enter that space. All right, and so the building performance area is managed by Mary English. I think a lot of you probably know Mary personally. I know she also presented to Heartland Renewable Energy Society a month or two ago on energy audits for homes. And so she's been working in this space for quite a while. And I mentioned a little bit ago that the building performance area at MEC originally consisted of neighborhood weatherization, and we were an educational resource for that from 1983 to about 2008. At which point we partnered with EPA's Home Performance with Energy Star program. We partnered with both utilities, the KCPNL at the time, and Missouri Gas Energy at the time. Everybody's evolved since then, and did programs, particularly rebates in that area through 2015. We had a little bit of a gap when we had a funding gap before 2018, when we started the Energy Solutions Hub program. So that's kind of, a lot of you are probably more familiar with us and with our programs all the way through 2015. And so today I'm going to get you up to speed on where we are with our current programs. If you need to reach out to anyone on the buildings staff, there's Mary, of course. Brittany Giroux is a Building Performance Program Associate, and she is working to support our benchmarking customer service area. And she is also managing the Healthy Homes Task Force. And there is a new project coming up with the EPA for neighborhood development of neighborhood heat plans for urban heat island effect related issues. So, and then Emily Wolf also works on our transportation side, but she's our senior program coordinator and policy analyst. And her area of expertise is in local policy and state policy. And she's been leading a lot of efforts related to codes adoption and so forth with Mary. And then Danielle Wells and Vicki Evans are our customer service representatives. And we have a brand new intern who just started with us as well. Her name is Vivian. So the background of why we need a building performance area, we can help building managers and homeowners understand how to make their homes more energy efficient and better use their energy and save money. It's because in the Kansas City area, our building stock is aging. I mean, Kansas City's not a new city. Buildings generate about 60% of Kansas City's greenhouse gases. This is according to the greenhouse gas inventory that the Kansas City did in 2017. And they update that every 5 to 10 years, depending on kind of where the staff is on that. So we may be hearing again on a new inventory in another year or two. And an interesting thing about Kansas City is that almost 50% of our residents are renters. And we have a large need for building retrofits, which include HVAC, air sealing, where leaks occur, energy efficient appliances, and so forth. And in addition, go ahead.
I could ask you, it seems like the energy retrofit is a particularly hard nut to crack. What do you see as the future of home energy retrofits, and how, do you have any ideas as to how to crack that nut?
It's difficult, and what MEC is doing to tackle it, we're working in two areas. I mentioned Emily and Mary's work with codes. Energy codes in the Kansas City market have never really adopted the kind of stringent building codes that are associated with energy efficiency in residential buildings. So we've been working really hard with Kansas City, Kansas, and Kansas City, Missouri to adopt the residential energy codes, the energy codes related to residential homes. They've been pretty proactive over the years with commercial energy codes and those kinds of things, but they've really kind of seemed to prefer the position of the the developers and the builders and the realtors over the years where it comes to residential homes. And so that's a major goal of ours, is to ensure that cities, counties, state governments have all of the information that they need to understand the high cost to residents and especially renters where it comes to these building codes and their effect on health and safety and, frankly, budget. So, and the housing and utility cost burden is description kind of goes into why it's so important. But that's one of those things, Craig. And then the other area, of course, is helping people find the rebate programs that exist, and also working to define and address the gaps. For instance, it's very difficult for renters to access energy efficiency retrofit funding because they don't control their buildings, and their building owners don't necessarily have to have visibility into the utility costs. And so there's that divide. So those are, you're right, Craig, and we haven't really cracked the nut yet, so to speak, but we have two paths that we're following to tackle that.
Right.
So on the housing and utility cost burden item, you all know everybody uses energy in your homes. But of course, to some Kansas Cityans, the cost that they pay for the utilities is a real burden. By definition, being housing cost burdened means that you are paying 30% or more of your monthly income toward rent or mortgage. And then oftentimes this doesn't even include utilities. And then for low income households, it eats up a huge amount of their monthly income. So the images on this slide come from a 2016 report from the American Council for Energy Efficient Economy, ACEEE, which was used in the Kansas City 5-year housing plan. Kansas City, Missouri is ranked the 7th highest for energy spending as a proportion of household income. And so you can see on the right of the percentage of households that are cost burdened by income groups. And this shows us that those in the community that are low income are largely housing cost burdened. And you may be paying more for your utilities for several reasons. And oops, pardon my. And so those are the kinds of things that we're trying to tackle with that. And in fact, there are other systemic challenges that we're trying to address as well. The architecture, engineering, construction market, the AEC market for new construction is incentivized to cut costs in design and build, and they're not necessarily required to consider the lifetime of the structure unless their client requires them to. And so codes to require those things are determined by each municipality in Kansas and Missouri because we're home rule states. And then rental properties, we just discussed, most of those pass their utility bills direct to tenants, and they don't even see the utility bills. They don't impact the rental properties. And so there's zero incentive from their financial perspective to worry about that. And then of course, existing structures, which I think is, I forget what the percentage is. I think it's about 60% of our structures are need a lot of help. So a little carrot and then without a policy enforcement piece of it, with no penalty associated with not participating, makes it more difficult. And so essentially we're behind on enforcing our codes, and we need to improve our codes is essentially what we're getting at there.
From that study that you referred to earlier, are there other municipalities that indeed have incentives for rental property owners?
We don't. In the Kansas City market, I don't know the answer to your question, Craig, but in the Kansas City market, I believe the answer is no.
Yeah.
I know that in, if Mary or Emily were standing up here, they might be able to answer your question differently. But I know that we've seen situations in, let's say, St. Louis, where more strict energy codes have been put in place, where the there has been no change, no reduction in the number of homes built and the amount of development that's happening. And so we know that it doesn't impact development and income from that perspective. So that's what we're using as opposed to other local peers. So with the Energy Solutions Hub, our intent is to tackle some of these issues that were talked about. This is a program area that MEC developed in 2016, 2017. Is that we couldn't really find funding for it until a couple of years ago, and it's now currently being largely funded through a contract with the City of Kansas City. And so that contract allows us to spend a lot of time looking into commercial buildings, supporting Kansas City's benchmarking efforts, using that benchmarking program as a tool and a lever and an example for other municipalities across the metro to adopt similar programs. We are doing a lot of technical and problem solving assistance. Mary and the team have visited several sites in recent months and talked to them directly about how to increase their energy efficiency and reduce their cost burdens and so forth. And within that, obviously, we have also the code training that we talked about a little bit ago as well. And in fact, Hathmore Technologies, Charla is going to be presenting codes workshop next week to 50 or so codes officials and municipal folks and then in the next week, and then we'll be repeating that program as it's demanded through the next year. I think the next planning dates for that is October of this year, in cooperation with the Johnson County codes.
That would make a good program in itself, Charla and Ken, is that meeting with codes officials.
True, or even just sharing updates to the codes.
Yeah.
That'd be great. And then, of course, we talked about the policy initiatives and how we're tackling those as well. And then, of course, we want to share data. So with the energy benchmarking program, the Energy Empowerment Ordinance in Kansas City, Missouri was adopted in 2016. And we're all the way down to buildings of 50,000 square feet or more that are required to submit energy and water benchmarking data. Compliance rate has been around 60% in recent years, and our charge really is to get that up to 75%. And of course, Mary's goal is a lot higher than that. So we'll see where we go with that. Essentially, benchmarking ordinances that don't have a customer service desk associated with it are much, much less likely to succeed. And so that's why we're involved in that. And then technical and problem solving assistance. Mary is essentially acting as a concierge service for building owners and operators for energy upgrades. Now, we don't actively perform the jobs. She has gone out to several sites recently, as I mentioned, but we're not doing audits. We're essentially providing information flow between the clients and service providers, and obviously the training support and doing peer learning, holding peer learning opportunities as well. Speaking of information education, and this is a slide that Mary put together, and it's really something that she talks about frequently, is how much of the work that we need to do is just communicate clearly to each other on our concepts and goals, and then ensure that we're readily available to take the steps when agreement is reached. And then, of course, I mentioned the Healthy Housing Task Force a little bit ago. This is doing outreach to different organizations in the KC market that have a vested interest in housing, in homelessness, and in reducing utility cost burden. And we have about 10 task force members, and their current charge really is to find the gaps and that that we've talked about a little bit already, Greg, and then to kind of brainstorm solutions and design some pathways that we can then follow down in years 2 and 3 of our contract with the city. So our policy and advocacy efforts, again, we talked about this a little bit already. We have an energy codes and standards report that was first published in January 2020. It's on our website. You can find it if you browse our Energy Solutions Hub pages. Emily is in the process of updating that now, especially as the municipalities are beginning to adopt some of them 2018 codes, some of them are now considering the 2021 codes. And so this kind of gives us a benchmark of where we are in the region and how our region compares with other areas of the country with adopting energy codes and what the effect is. It was a useful report in 2020, and with the 21 code coming out, it became not obsolete, but we needed to update it pretty quickly. So that's happening. I already mentioned the code training to officials. We also have it's a recorded webinar at this point, but we created a kind of a 101. What is benchmarking? What are energy codes and why are they important for you? The intent was to help policymakers who aren't deeply involved in engineering and codes to understand why it's important for them to champion this. And so that's again a 101 webinar that's available on our YouTube channel. Of course, we do other advocacy work with as well. And some of those examples are we're working with the state of Missouri's state energy planning process. It's ongoing right now. We are working with we've provided a lot of feedback to Kansas and Missouri on their qualified allocation plan for housing, and other efforts like that. And then the opportunities to engage with the Energy Solutions Hub team are primarily through our advisory boards. We have one that is for the Energy Solutions Hub at large. And then I've mentioned the Healthy Housing Task Force, and Mary's contact information is at the beginning of this section, and I'd be happy to share that in chat if anyone is interested in joining those. And then I touched on data capturing and sharing earlier, and really the reason why that's important is that when we share outcomes, people come to trust MEC and the work that we're doing, and really it becomes, we become a more inclusive agency when we do that, and so that's a major goal of ours as well. On the transportation side of things, Miriam Buoleg is our current program manager, and she was doing project management before she was promoted to program manager, and she's doing a fantastic job with the team. She is the lead for our Clean Cities Coalition as well, and manages those staff members. And the staff members, I don't have a staff slide for them, but they include David Albrecht. He's been with MEC for a long time, and some of you all know him personally as well. He's a Clean Cities coordinator and a project lead for our DARA program. Brant Hertenstein is relatively new to MEC the past couple of years, and he is a Clean Cities coordinator and leading our electrification programs. I'm going to leave someone out, and that's definitely not intentional, but Emily is also working with our transportation team, and she's providing support to a couple of our projects and leading an electrification program for our terminal tractors. We just lost our Clean Cities coordinator for the Central Kansas Coalition, and we're replacing that position as well. So, so a lot of good people doing good work there. But the reason why we're doing that work is because the transportation industry in general it's just a massive impact on our daily lives, and you all are experiencing that right now with the rising gas and diesel prices. So you're more, and the food prices, right? You're more aware of how the cost of transportation affects our daily lives, because it's just the cost is increasing as we speak currently. but it's so much a part of our daily lives. The food that you eat, the place that you sleep, you walked or drove probably somewhere today already. You may have used a bus, or you may have rode a bicycle. Any of those choices that you make has an impact on the greater picture of transportation. And if more of us were choosing alternative transportation methods, we'd have a smaller footprint. In the Kansas City market, transportation is about 25% of the greenhouse gases. Nationwide, it's right at 51%. And so the more that we can do to reduce our footprint there, the better. So one of the major program umbrellas for our transportation program is Clean Cities. And this is a Department of Energy framework that was created in 1993 and has been improved over the years. There are currently about 80 designated coalitions nationwide. Our Kansas City Regional Clean Cities Coalition is designated. Our Central Kansas Clean Cities Coalition is not. They're an apprentice coalition currently. But the national program provides a framework for businesses and government and agencies to work together. It also provides a funding mechanism that Clean Cities coalitions don't have immediate access to. It's a competitive program, but MEC has been very successful in accessing funds through that. Our Kansas City Clean Cities Coalition has been around since '98, and the Central Kansas was kind of born in 2012 and 13 out of a clear need to serve rural interest in addition to urban interest, and they're a little different. And so we decided to branch out. So the Clean Cities program is built on this framework of a coalition kind of in the center as a hub, and then providing information, education, the technical and problem solving assistance, the peer networking, those local and national partnerships, and then competitively awarded financial assistance. And that may sound familiar. We just talked about the Energy Solutions Hub with those same activities and framework. And that's because we built the hub framework on this Clean Cities framework. It's been so successful for us in Kansas City tackling the transportation problem. We thought it was translatable to the building side. I'm going to talk about some projects here with this, and feel free to stop me at any time. I haven't practiced this. I meant to give you this caveat at the kind of the beginning, where these slides were put together by Mary and by Miriam, and so I have far less knowledge about what the storytelling was supposed to be on this than I maybe should have. So, but let's transportation projects. So what you're seeing here is a picture of the Kansas City buses. You can see on the top that the first one is electric powered, and I believe the second one is too. Kansas City's shuttle buses have been powered by natural gas or electricity since about 1997. They started using alternative fuels pretty early on, and so their buses have always been clean for the last several years, and they're transitioning some of their CNG fleet to electric, and they may go all electric as the years go on. So that's one project that we've been involved with in providing funding support to. Electrify Kansas, under the Electrify Heartland umbrella, is part of a nationwide network of statewide programs that is working toward electrification of transportation in these areas of work. They're kind of, it's more so focused on consumer electric vehicles, but there is definitely a fleet and policy side of things. So there's some branded programs, there's consumer education and local chapter development. If anyone is interested in joining a local chapter in the Kansas City area or Colorado, for those of you who live there, we can actually, if you probably look up Drive Electric Colorado, I bet you could find that there as well. But go to electrifyheartland.org and find your Kansas or Missouri chapter as well. Utility and regulator education and engagement, charging infrastructure planning and corridor development. local and state policymaker education, and we are dealers. Car dealers are notoriously unexcited about electric vehicles, and so part of this program is also reaching out to dealers and trying to engage them more fully in electrification. And then, of course, fleet electrification. The Clean Cities coalitions generally have been more focused on fleet than consumer, so that's where that comes into play. We have a new grant. It's brand new. It just launched in April, which is essentially using federal funding that is obligated through the Justice 40 initiative to ensure that, I believe it's 40% of the funding, I couldn't have that percentage wrong, but a significant amount of the funding for any programs that were released in 2022 is benefiting underserved and frontline communities. And so we planned our whole program around that concept, where we have 8 partners that signed on early to do fleet electrification and public charging stations in their for their communities, constituents, or organizations. And they have generously provided an overmatch so that we can then next year conduct a small grants program that would enable small programs, small businesses, communities to increase access to electrification in their areas without a cost share burden or a very small cost share burden. So that was the impact of that. One of our project recipients is Olathe, City of Olathe, Kansas. They have been using natural gas in their trash fleet for, I don't know if it's a decade yet, but for quite some time. And more recently, they started using electric vehicles in their fleet, and we worked with them to buy a few electric vehicles to add to their fleet, and also install some additional or some charging stations that are solar powered on their properties. Another program that we've been leading is electric charging station innovation. This is our streetlight EV project. And it's a research program, a pilot, and it has a little, some kind of, not necessarily arbitrary, but some rules that mean that we can't engage fully with a kind of an equitably distributed charging station network really with this. But we're doing the best we can with the rules that we have to kind of abide by here. But with that program, we're partnered with the City of Kansas City, with Evergy, Black McDonald, LilyPad EV. We worked with Missouri Science and Technology, and our researcher left and went to Penn State. So we've moved the rest of that program to Penn State. National Renewable Energy Laboratory is a partner. EV Noir is a partner, and Westside Housing Organization also worked with us on that. So a lot of partnerships there. And the goal is to install 30 to 50 charging stations on streetlights in an effort to determine kind of the efficiencies of deploying charging stations that way. And so that's the purpose of that. And then we have a project with some terminal tractor fleets. I don't know if any of you are familiar with terminal tractors. That's a picture of one. That's what they look like. Orange EV is situated in Riverside, Missouri, and they have been manufacturing electric terminal tractors for about 10 years now. They were the first to market. They're the only ones that have really a commercial market kind of established, and they're doing really well. But they're doing really well in incentivized markets like California, New York, and Chicago, and they're doing less well in places like Kansas City and Kansas and Missouri, where no incentives exist. And so that's why we developed this program, so that we could get some deployments in our area and provide some demonstration materials that show how they pay back without in an unincentivized market. So there's that one.
Kelly,
Yes.
what is the definition of a terminal yard truck?
I wish I could give you a fast one. I haven't developed the language for that, but it is this little, it's also called a terminal tractor. It's called a yard truck. It's called a goat. It's called all kinds of things, but its purpose is to move containers in a shipping yard, for instance, from the shipping container to a truck or to a train, depending on where its next destination is. So it can be on its way to the place. And they're also used in distribution yards where you have a truck that came in with a container and is dropping it off and taking off. If that container isn't needed yet, it kind of sits someplace. So these tractors are essentially off-road heavy trucks that pull really heavy loads. And they are, typically in industrial areas. This picture is actually in Johnson County wastewater plant. So it has a municipal job, but they're typically in distribution yards, freight yards, any place where there's a lot of heavy truck traffic moving containers around within the yard as needed. One of the things that's kind of important to note about this is that diesel is the only other fuel really that's kind of available for jobs like this. I think there may be a compressed natural gas terminal tractor out there, but this duty cycle is so exactly perfect for electrification that it was it was just, I don't know. Orange EV is great. They've done a fantastic job of developing this, but it's kind of like, duh, it should have been electric all along kind of thing. But so they don't move very much during a day. They have a lot of ground to cover, right, back and forthing, but they don't go very far. And so distance isn't an issue. But they carry such a heavy load and weight, plus the fact that they're starting and stopping so often in a small area means that essentially the diesel versions of the terminal tractor are putting off so much emission from the diesel engines, even the efficient engines. They're just not meant to operate at start stop with such heavy loads. They're not as efficient, and so they burn a lot more fuel and have a lot more emissions than what their EPA certification is supposed to allow. But you electrify everything, and it's the perfect duty cycle for electrification, and they do amazing. And of course, they reduce the emissions to zero, except for tire particulates. So yeah, sorry for the long drawn out response to that, Craig, but that's
much appreciated. A good explanation.
Riverside, Missouri, local guys, super smart. So 24/7 Travel Stores is another local company. They are based out of Salina, Kansas, and they have truck stop and fuel retail stores, about 9 or 10 of them, I forget which, throughout the state of Kansas. And they took a big leap with us and in a project and developed biodiesel terminal, a little mini terminal at 2 of their stores so that they could serve their other stores with biodiesel. So they have biodiesel blends at all of their stores now. They also are installing electric charging stations at all or most of their stores as well, with some project funding with us. And it is risky for an independent fuel retailer to take leaps like this. And so we're grateful for the partnership from 24/7 Travel Stores. And that charging station you see with the Mustang plugged into it, that is in McPherson, Kansas. That was a kind of a blank spot on the corridor between Kansas City and Wichita. So that, and Mark filled that in. So very excited to have that partnership and grateful to him. We've also been working with the Kansas Soybean Commission with a biodiesel outreach and training program for about 10 years. And really the purpose of this is to work with fuel retailers like 24/7 travel stores and with fleets and to help them understand, what happens when you start using biodiesel in a diesel truck that's been using, ULSD for a while, and how to handle the filter changes and so forth. Educating diesel technicians in technical schools and colleges about biodiesel and use and handling thereof, and so forth. And so that's been a program and a partnership that we feel is important, especially given that Kansas and Missouri are both agricultural states. We recognize that monoculture isn't the best, but given that agriculture supports so much of the state economies and so much of our rural residents and so forth, and also that biofuels are much cleaner than just straight diesel, we are really proud to continue this program as well. And then the last program that is with our transportation group is the diesel emission reduction programming from the EPA. We do a lot of programs with carriers and including UPS. We work with work trucks as well, such as those kind of mini dump trucks, snow plows, cherry pickers, those kinds of utility trucks with the city of Kansas City. We work with them to replace diesel vehicles with alternatives. And more recently, we've been able to work with companies who run those terminal tractors like Laser Spot and Ruan on those programs. So it's been really effective at diesel emission reduction, and a longstanding program at MEC as well. And then the last person at MEC I want to introduce you to is Joy Ellsworth. She's our development director, and her charge is really to work on community engagement and funding development. And in all of our programs, we work to ensure that we're not only listening to voices from people with diverse backgrounds and experience, but that there's also direct access to impact decisions through our boards, committees, and project development work groups. And we also work to ensure that we have adequate funding to sustain our programs and grow into new areas that the region needs us to. And so I thought I would leave you with a kind of a ways to get involved. I talked about all the boards and committees that we work through. There are also advisory boards for both of the Clean Cities coalitions. I don't think I mentioned those earlier. There are also volunteer opportunities. The Master Gardeners of Greater Kansas City is a long-standing partner since 2011, I think, at Project Living Proof, our demonstration home. And they keep our urban garden maintained. They seed, they weed, they package the produce for donation to Jewish Community Center currently, and so forth. And so I wanted to give a shout out to Master Gardeners. They've been just a longstanding volunteer partnership, and very grateful to them for that. We also, of course, could use volunteers for program development. And if you have a particular skill set that you'd like to use with a nonprofit organization, we're happy to talk with you about that. And maybe we could customize some volunteer opportunities for you there as well. And then, of course, we do take donations. One thing that I wanted to ask, if we have time, Craig, is for maybe some dialogue on the concept of whether Kansas City needs an organization like MEC to lead technical assistance and route kind of funding opportunities to small business and residents for renewable programs. And so I didn't create a slide for that, but that's definitely something I would love to have feedback from this group on. I know it's, renewables are your charge. So insight from you guys as to whether we are are needed to provide specific aspects of it, or if things are being handled already, if there are ways that we could partner and support those kinds of things. I'd love to have that kind of a dialogue this
I
morning.
think we'd be happy to be involved in brainstorming with you guys about what you're doing. You're doing an awful lot, and you're on the cutting edge of a lot of change. So, I'll speak for myself, and it's also probably others can chime in, but I'm sure that you could use more funding and more volunteers, but this is a big scope of work that you guys are taking on.
Mhm. Yeah, it's pretty big, and I probably went a little too much into detail here and there, and I really should have given you guys more opportunity to ask questions and direct the conversation. So I do want to invite a different type of dialogue here, if there's time.
Yeah, if we can get together to talk about the things you're talking about in terms of your mission, we'd be happy to get a Zoom session with your board and our board and let you guys set the agenda as to what your questions of us might be, and just kind of brainstorm.
Okay, Craig,
Great, thank
Yeah.
you.
let's, she's asking for some feedback right now.
Okay.
As far as, Kelly, you're saying, should you guys be a conduit for telling people about rebates, which you said you're already doing, or are you asking, is there more that you should do? That I didn't quite understand what you would like to see, where you're at, what you think MEC should be doing that you're not doing now, because you've got
Right.
pretty full plate, but it sounds like you think that there's another role that you should be taking on potentially.
Yeah, our board has asked us, so the building side and the transportation side both intersect somewhat with renewable energy, because both of them use energy sources. But neither of those programs are primarily concerned with, let's say, distributed energy or kind of the technical aspects of installing renewables. And we're not geared toward making sure people understand about financial opportunities that would help them reduce the cost of adopting renewables in their own homes or businesses. How do you buy into a shared renewables? How do you start a renewable co-op? I mean, these are just things that I'm kind of brainstorming on. And the fact is, Ken, that we don't know. We don't have the expertise on our current staff, and we don't have the financial resources to develop a renewable program right now. And so what the board has asked us to do is explore it, kind of create a plan that minimizes our opportunity cost for the other programs, kind of while we develop a renewable program. And also as part of that, to determine whether we need to do this in our region, whether this is a gap, or if there are programs that are already tackling this and we can become a supporter as opposed to leading a program. So that's kind of.
All right, I will jump in on that for just a minute. I think
Sure.
there is a need, if that's your question. What I think there is a need, and maybe we can talk about this too, is that what they call a microgrid, which you didn't bring up, but if you could connect houses, let's say within the same block, that all are in the same area. Let's say a typical block in Kansas City may have 20 homes. Now, a lot of people, when I talk to people about solar, because I've done this for a long time, I taught solar, as you know, back in the 70s. So one of the things that a lot of people don't think about is if you put a solar system on your home, but you work during the day, you're not really getting much advantage out of the solar. It's producing solar when nobody's home.
Right.
But if you have quite a few people connected to a microgrid, some people are home while other people are not. If there's a solar system producing, somebody along this microgrid is probably getting advantage of that sun-produced energy. And so it's kind of like buying solar through your utility company. But a lot of people don't want to do that because normally that involves an increase instead of a decrease in your energy bill. And they don't necessarily know where the energy is coming from, and sometimes they don't trust the utility to actually be doing what they say they're doing. There's a trust factor there. Also, I think there's a lot of folks that just can't do solar. we're one of them. I promote solar, but we have big trees that we don't want to cut down. So we might put a solar system on a building that we build, or we may put a ground mount in. We're thinking about that. I wanted to build a building in the back to put a solar on. Most folks don't think about that. Most people think, can I put it on my roof or not? And if they have trees and it's not possible, then that's the end of it. So it's kind of also, there's an educational component as to just because you can't use your roof because you have trees or a building blocking your home doesn't necessarily mean that you're totally out of the, you can't get solar on your building. You can't get any solar. There's other ways. So whether or not you want to take that on, I think maybe, I don't know exactly how to answer it except to say that there's a need, but I don't know the best way to fill it.
Okay. Yeah, I love the idea of sitting down with our kind of program development team and the HRES board and kind of exploring those options and opportunities. I noticed there's a lot of stuff in chat that I hadn't seen until just now. Craig, I don't know if you want to moderate that.
Let's see. I think June, oh, there's 6 in there, so I haven't. Okay, let's take from the top. Name of the training organization. I'm not sure what that question is. That's from Christian. Can you?
That was a question for Keith and he answered it in the chat as well. Solar Energy International, first 4-hour training class is free.
Okay. And then June Holte indicated a terminal tractor is a kind of semi-tractor intended to move semi-trailers within a cargo yard, warehouse facility, or intermodal facility, much like a switcher locomotive is used in positioning rail cars. So thank you for that.
Much like a forklift works in a Home Depot or someplace. It's just in that building moving things around, and that's why it's a good application for electric, because electric forklifts have been around for a long time.
And then Dan Wankura, hi Dan. I asked if he could present a blue sky project idea, solar use along highways. Is that an idea, Dan, for a future presentation, or did you want to make a brief description of that?
No, I think it's probably worthwhile bringing up now because MEC, I think, could assist with this. In fact, we've already been emailing back and forth with Brant there at MEC. There's a group called the REY. You know, it's like if you look at their website, you know, it's the REY, THERAY. I think it's .org, and they are promoting and helping. I think they have some funding to do like along highways, rest areas, to put in a charge station and then power up by solar at that location. So we've been trying to find the, you know, this gets into a GIS project so you can map it out. So we've been trying to find the parcel boundaries for land, you know, parcels owned or controlled by highway like KDOT along highways so that we can, you know, get that to the REY so they can map it out and then present it and then hope, you know, possibly show it to the Kansas legislature maybe, or I don't know how you would get this moving along, but it's something to promote a very simple idea of having local solar provide charging stations along highways. Pretty basic idea.
Yeah.
So I don't know, any comments?
That's a complicated concept, not solar charging stations, but how to get electricity to charging stations on rural highways. And it's definitely not something that's been really solved or I think even adequately tackled at this point. And I believe, Dan, that the concept of solar powered battery storage on site so that a car can pull up and charge using a battery, the batteries instead of the grid is kind of the best solution that's been suggested so far. So yeah, I think that's a great solution to that issue.
Is it okay if I follow up with you on that?
Yeah, absolutely. You can continue to follow up with Grant. We have a connection now with KDOT. I mentioned that we lost our Clean Cities Coalition coordinator for Central Kansas, and Tammy Alexander went to work as the transportation electrification manager at KDOT. And so she's working on travel corridors for electrification and other alternative fuels if she gets her way.
That's
But
probably
yes,
the thing. I mean, or not, that's if she's doing, I know KDOT can be rather bureaucratic, but she probably has some opportunity to push things inside KDOT.
exactly. She's new there as of last month. And so she's going to be pushing the boundaries as much as she can. Yes.
And
Okay.
I
Well,
think you're
thank
going to
you.
want, Dan, I think you're going to want to also think about capacitors. Maybe everybody here is not familiar with capacitors, but a capacitor can store energy for fast discharge, and it can do high voltage. So if you had a combination of a solar system charging a bank of batteries and a capacitor type system, because what they're shooting for electric cars is fast charging. And to do that, you have to have high voltage and a lot of oomph behind it, a lot of amps and high voltage to get it to charge quickly. And so they want to make it where you can charge a car like you charge or you fill your car with gas. If you have a regular charging system, it takes a while, maybe 20 minutes or half an hour, maybe longer. But you gotta, what they're trying to do now or have been in the past is set it up next to a quick trip or something. So while you're sitting there charging your car, you can go get a drink or use the bathroom or buy a candy bar. So have something there to do while you're waiting. But if you could charge it within 5 minutes or 10 minutes or something, you just wait for a few minutes and then you're on your way. So the way you might want to think about it is it's probably a combination of batteries, capacitors, and solar. And the solar can slowly charge the batteries and the capacitor and get them up to snuff. And then when somebody wants to use the power, it's a quick discharge system.
Yeah, got a good idea. Yeah, thanks, Ken. Yeah, I will reach out to you too when the time comes. You sound like you got the engineer.
Right. I worked with electric utilities all my life, and I know that even most folks probably don't know that utilities have a big battery backup system in them, like Independence Power and Light, because when their power goes down, they need something to fire everything up again. Just like when you start your car, the utility goes dead, they have to have a starting system. So anyway, you need to be able to fast charge cars, electric EVs, to make it really where people like them.
Yeah, well, just one word on that. Bill Roush, I think you probably all know Bill. I don't know if he's on this call or not, but he, when he and I were talking not too long ago, and he said, it seems like we miss out on a lot of opportunities in Kansas because nobody ever knows, because some good ideas people don't dive into. And so they're just left for other states to do them, and we lose out. So,
and Dan, this whole thing kind of illustrates this idea specifically illustrates the intersection between renewables and transportation. And there are similar intersections between renewables and buildings. But if our charter at MEC is to focus on the technical aspects of the built environment, as opposed to the grid connectedness of it, then, that it kind of illustrates where we could benefit from a program, a sister program at MEC that's focused on renewables and can really provide that technical support to the other programs as well. So you're really illustrating that for me. Because I believe that's true. We've lost out on, maybe not lost out on, but we're certainly late to the table, later than we needed to be with some of these ideas. Yeah.
There's a bunch of links that people are providing for us. So you may want to take a look at those links in the chat, if any of those are interesting to you. Randy put some up, June put some up. So they're all in the chat. I've got just a question based upon ignorance. And that is because I've not heard much about natural gas vehicles. And I don't have any picture in my mind about when someone needs to fill up, what they do. Do they is it something that they can transfer gas from one container to the container in the vehicle? Or do they actually put a canister of compressed natural gas in the vehicle? Is anybody able
so I've that was a lot of the work that I did as a Clean Cities coordinator and project manager, you know, up until about 4 or 5 years ago. And so the answer to that is that the vehicle is retrofitted or built from the factory to use natural gas instead of gasoline or diesel. You can have a vehicle with both, but that becomes expensive to maintain and manage. So it's on board the vehicle, and there are fueling stations in the Kansas City market. Some of them are being mothballed more and more because of some kind of marketplace difficulties with maintaining access to engines, maintaining a good price point for natural gas engines. But we have, I think, still a pretty robust access to natural gas in the Kansas City market. There are fueling stations in Springfield and Columbia and and Wichita. And so there's a limited ability for over-the-road trucks to access natural gas fueling stations. And those are the types of operations that work best with natural gas, because it is so expensive to engineer, build, sell the compression containers and the fueling stations that are required to provide it. So your best bets with operating natural gas powered equipment is the heavy equipment, including municipal work trucks. When you go down to consumer vehicles, it becomes too expensive, and you don't kind of make your money back. But it is something that has been used very heavily in other countries. I want to say, I didn't talk very much about propane, but propane is another gaseous fuel. Propane is the first or second highest used fuel in one of the foreign countries, because they had set up a network that made it easy to access it. So it's just like, you know, the better access you have, the more easy it is to add it. But it's an issue of scale, and the scale for natural gas engines and containers has never reached high enough that the cost has come down.
So when they refuel, they're refueling from one container into a container on the vehicle, is that right? Or are they
In
putting
order
a new container in the vehicle?
Yeah, they're fueling often from a container at a fueling station into a container in the vehicle. It's the fuel tank of the vehicle, and they can also fuel from the pipeline, essentially the distribution lines, if the pressure is great enough at the distribution site.
Yeah.
But mostly they're fueling off the containers. So it works it's kind of like a battery storage system, frankly. You have banks of natural gas compressed natural gas containers, and they fill up from the pipeline, from the distribution system. And when somebody comes to fuel up, they discharge from those containers so that it's faster.
Yeah, it sounds like it would have to be much more complex than putting gas in a gas tank.
It is because of the compression.
Yeah.
And it requires a lot more electricity on the site because the compression equipment, chews up
Right.
power. Yeah. Yep.
Other questions?
Kelly, I've got a couple of questions for you that I jotted down during the course of your presentation. On the transportation side, at one point there was talk in the metro of having the trail system kind of connected together into a cohesive network. Are you guys involved in coordinating that or pushing that or helping out in some way?
We don't get involved in that because Mid-America Regional Council and Bike Walk KC do such a fantastic job of that, that we don't feel that we can add much in that space. We do support campaigns when we feel our voice is warranted, but we don't get directly involved in that because of how effective they are. It's also part of the regional plan. If you're familiar with how regional planning works from a transportation perspective, the Metropolitan Planning Organization, Mid-America Regional Council, kind of collects plans from the individual cities, municipalities, and they put it into a plan that they then share with the state and so forth. But there are rules and guidelines that develop in a stakeholder process, et cetera, that helps them program funding to make those plans happen. So the program design and guidelines already kind of require that, like our 10-year plan, 20-year plan, maybe both, probably both, have contained plans to make those trailways connected throughout the city. And so as municipalities are kind of applying to the funding streams that come from Mid-America Regional Council, the more that they provide those trail connections, the better likelihood it is that their program and project is going to get funded. And so they've definitely created a really impactful way to make sure that that happens over time.
Okay, all right, thank you. I wanted to ask you too about the streetlight charging pilot project you'd mentioned. Are you far enough along in that to talk about like the actual, I'm just curious about the charging, not the electrical charging, but the money charging, because it looked like it was a charge point unit. So it would just be part of the charge point network.
Right. Working with Evergy to, in order for them to own and operate the stations after the project is completed, it needs to be on the charge point network so that they don't have to manage more than one charging vendor. So it is a partnership with Evergy and the city, and yes, it's going to be on the Clean Charge Network through Evergy.
Okay, and I assume you'd be charging the people because some of the green point or the charge point locations are paid for by the city, but I'm assuming this would be charged to the individuals who would using it.
They will be hosted by Evergy, and Evergy is not, I don't think they're able to offer free charging anymore. I think by tariff, they now have a charging rate. And so that'll be at I think it's 22 cents currently per kilowatt.
All right. And the last question I had for you was that if someone had a specific code, like a building code question, obscure for a particular area, do you have a resource, the MEC, that we could like ask for that too?
Yes, Mary English is probably the best. I mean, Emily would be a good person to ask. Mary would probably be consulted in that, so we can go directly to Mary as well, and also Charla.
I'm an ICC preferred provider for training, so if you have any questions about codes, I can probably help you there too.
Okay, yeah, I'm interested in rainwater and incorporating rainwater into a house, like for flushing toilets, that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Kelly, a question for you. I don't know if it's been discussed yet. Has there been consideration for like V2G or vehicle to grid for like a virtual power plant? Other benefits of that in the future?
We haven't done a lot of work at MEC on that. Typically, we try to work. We try to do implementation. We do demonstration when we feel it's necessary to move the market along. And when there's a funding opportunity that exists. V2G it's a great idea, especially for schools and places that don't necessarily use their fleet all that often. The flip side of somebody who has an electric vehicle fleet that doesn't use their vehicles all that often, the cost of acquisition is usually so high that it can't be overcome in an ROI. So a V2G risk mitigation system, right, for energy and power, or possibly reducing energy costs because you're able to do this might bring that back into balance. And so there are a lot of factors that go into that. I think most of the V2G projects to date have been demonstration projects, and I don't have a lot of expertise to respond to that, Keith, but it is an exciting thing, especially for emergency services and emergency management and that kind of thing. So I think I'm going to have to leave it at that. But if you guys want to engage in a conversation, I think Dan has probably done a little bit of research into that. Some interested parties on the call who may want to jump in there as well.
Let me first clarify. June wants to know, and so do I, what is B? Is it B2G or BTG you're talking
It's
about?
V as in Victor, it's vehicle to grid. I apologize for not making that clear. That would have made that little conversation a little bit more understandable, right?
Gotcha.
Yeah. So battery electric vehicle serving as a backstop, as battery energy storage.
Yeah, we are, golly, we could fast forward 100 years as long as we're still around and see what we are doing with our energy. It'll be a lot different than it is today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Then
oh, sorry, I was gonna say they had a very good, at the American Solar Energy Society's conference last year, they had a presentation by the Fort Collins, Colorado municipal utility and the city, which are very well connected. The municipal utility is actually connected to the buildings and all. And then the question came up about vehicle to grid. And they said that they've invested a lot of time trying to figure out how to make that work, and have contacted people in different countries like Japan, where they're making electric cars. And what the problem is, and is going to be for a while, is there's no standardization. Different vehicles, Teslas have different voltages than Leafs, than Chevy vehicles, than Ford vehicles, and the connections are different. And so they said until it becomes standardized the voltages and other things, and also connections, it won't happen. And
do you see that as an eventuality?
They think it should, but making manufacturers all play on the same, it's the same problem you have with phones. You can't, for a long time, and maybe still, you couldn't use an Apple charger on an Android phone. And you think that would be very much a no-brainer, because I mean, we're just talking about something you put in your pocket. Why does that have to be a problematic thing? So talking about vehicles, everybody wants their own proprietary system. So I think it'll happen personally, but what they're saying is it's not going to happen anytime soon. Because
Keith, I wonder if you have any thoughts on that as well in the industry that you work in. I wonder if you are directly working on that and have something to share as well. I know that you're the one who asked the question, but
I'm just a renewable energy nerd. It's something I'm really excited about. I play with lithium batteries, but it's kind of a work in progress here. But that's a lithium battery that's going to be powering my my trailer here. But anyway,
yeah,
there's just a good technology out there. I like to see where it's going. So.
Yeah, and I think some of the arguments, and I don't know how valid these are. Ken and Keith, you would probably know better than I do on how valid these arguments are. But anytime you have a connection into the distribution grid, as opposed to like a private grid, it's going out essentially and you're kind of giving over a security and control point that could be hacked, I suppose. And so there are security concerns, at least at the utility level, with connecting to various points like that. And I think that's part of that is again, I don't know how valid that argument is, since we don't have a renewables program at MEC. I can't answer that, but that's the argument that I've heard against kind of widespread distributed generation grid points and V2G type operations. So
the big problem with that is if you're feeding back into the grid and the grid goes down and somebody's working on it and you're feeding it, then the lineman out there can get shocked because.
Well, you have a requirement for anti-islanding, so that it would sense if the grid went down.
Yeah.
So it would disconnect. That's
the thing with all of I have a solar system and as soon as we lose power from the grid, it'll shut off my solar devices so they don't backfeed into the grid.
Yeah, that's every
That's
inverter that's connected to
required.
grid's required to have that feature
Yeah.
that will disconnect. So,
And so is, you know, the new Ford coming out has vehicle to home,
Mhm.
but you know, I mean, you
Yeah.
have to disconnect your house from the grid to use it,
mhm.
Right.
or you're going to have problems with the power company.
Right.
I
It's
left
the
out,
same with any power backup system.
I
Yeah,
left out one important aspect too, that they brought up that, that the Fort Collins thing is that once you connect it, if you, everything in right now, cars are like an island, like we've been talking about other things, that the power goes to the car, but the car does not feed back. And so once you start making it where the car is actually connected to where it can go two ways, then now what do you do about the warranty? If somebody zaps if there's a transient or somebody short circuits the thing, or if there's somebody next door using a arc welder, then that would potentially take out the electric vehicle. Now, does the warranty cover what? So
Yeah.
that's another
That-
problem.
Now, Ken, you're getting into the similar arguments as to automated automated driving, right? Self-driving cars.
Who's responsible if there's a wreck?
Exactly. Who's responsible? At what point is it a good idea? Are you reducing deaths or are you increasing them? Are you reducing injuries or increasing them?
Yeah,
Right.
technology is changing all the time. I mean, the
Mhm.
statistics right now show that self-driving causes fewer deaths than human driving. But
Statistically in models, but how is it bearing out in reality, and how can you update the software to further reduce the
it's improving all the time. That's all part of gathering the data. So,
right on.
Very good.
I
Any
can
other
see somebody-
questions?
I was just gonna say, I can see somebody on what we got automated driving, that maybe if it has even very few accidents, any accidents it does have, now you've got big pockets behind it.
Mhm.
So there's the aspect of that maybe you could sue Tesla because of it.
Well, yeah, and I think that Federal Highways or NHTSA, forget which organization is responsible for this aspect of it, is considering removing the authorization for Tesla's kind of higher levels of self-driving because of some of the accidents, like doing a recall essentially on the systems.
yeah, but then back to what Ken was saying, there has been talk about where the insurance involved with the self-driving technology would be responsible for covering accidents. Yeah, it's coming. It's in the process.
You know, Keith, I'm glad you mentioned insurance because that's just another avenue. You know, we all rely on insurance policies to cover us in the event of X, Y, or Z to varying degrees, depending on, you know, whether you're an individual person or a business. But we can't insure charging stations right now. There's not enough data for the insurance actuarials to develop a model that is reliable for the insurance companies. So you can self-insure, you can ask, you know, you can look for somebody who's willing to insure you at an exorbitant price, but you can't get a kind of a regular insurance policy to cover charging stations yet. And I would imagine that the same is probably true to a great extent for those kinds of things that we've been kind of like on the bleeding edge technology.
how does that work for home charging stations? I mean, if your charger burns your house down, that could be a problem.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't have a home charger. I just plug it into my 110 outlet. I've been driving electric for 7 years. I didn't mention that earlier. And I've that whole time I've just plugged my car into my wall out in my garage. So I haven't had to look into insuring a charging station in my home. It's a good question.
I mean, ultimately, the charging, like a level 2 charge in your house, is just another component. You know, as long as it's wired up properly, and you have an electrician who provides the right copper, it's just another device that's consuming.
It's another
juice.
appliance, right? And so if
Right.
it's considered a home appliance, then it would be, I guess, insured in that way. That's a good point.
Any other questions?
Yeah, what kind of car do you drive? Kelly?
I started out with a BMW i3 on a lease, and I thought that car was awesome. But it had a German supply chain and stupid tires. So, so when my lease was up, I bought a Chevy Bolt. And so I have discovered since my purchase that Chevy caps the charging rate at 50 kilowatts, and I cannot take advantage of DC fast chargers. I can't really do road trips in my Bolt, even though the mileage is there, because the charging rate is so relatively slow. So that's a bummer. I'm rather irritated at that fact.
Yeah. Well, Teslas are a little spendy.
Yes, they are spendy. I did pass a Mustang, electric Mustang, on my way back from the farmer's market this morning. It's the first one I've seen in the wild.
Yeah. Well, supply chain is killing the sales of
Yes.
electric vehicles.
Supply chain is killing everything.
Yeah,
And
that's
that's one
true.
thing I didn't mention during my description of the projects, but it is severely impacting our ability to close out some projects that are old at this point. It's causing us some issues.
Yeah.
You know, on supply chain issues, I mean, this stuff will work itself out. But it is a matter of how, I mean, things will change undoubtedly. You know, whether, you know, some things that we obviously should produce more of in the United States that we've let lapse over the years. So I don't know, this is interesting times, right? But
Yeah.
I think we should all be watching very carefully and doing as much as we can to make sure that we take advantage of any opportunities that, you know, come to pass during these odd times.
You know, Dan, my husband recommends that everybody watch Peter Zion's videos. I think, I don't know how often he releases them, but he's a big fan. And Peter talks about global geopolitics, but also supply chain and so forth, and very interesting.
How do you spell his last name?
Zeihan, I think. If somebody's familiar with him and knows better, please volunteer that
Yeah,
information.
it doesn't sound like the Jewish form of Zion. Zion. It's not
Nope,
Z-I-O-N.
it's not simple. It's not Z-I-O-N.
Give me that again.
I believe it's Z-E-I-H-A-N.
All right.
Sounds German.
If you Google it, it'll probably give you the correct spelling. If
That's my theory. Yeah.
yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah.
I'll check that out.
Any more comments? Questions? Well, this has certainly been an informative presentation, Kelly, so thank you so much. And it shows us, at least in the Kansas City region, where the cutting edge of information is. And so thank you so much for doing your share of the cutting and
Keep up the good work.
yeah. All right. Unless
Thank you for the opportunity. I really appreciated the conversation. It's my favorite part. And
Yeah.
I don't know if we were supposed to go for an hour and a half, but I really
Oh,
appreciate
no.
this last 40 minutes of conversation.
No, we go for anywhere from 45 minutes to 2 hours. So you're definitely in the sweet spot.
Excellent.
All right. I'm gonna click the button that ends the conversation, and we'll have this up on the website. You see Kelly's email and phone number there. So you can definitely contact her anytime. And of course, you can always contact us at info@heartlandrenewable.org. And we will have this up on the web soon. So thank you very much. Bye all.